The office building at 11:45 on a Friday night smelled like stale ambition and dying fluorescence. Austin West noticed that, first, not the quiet, not the emptiness, not the way his own breath seemed too loud in the long corridor leading to the executive floor. He noticed the smell. 14 months in this building, and it still greeted him the same way every single shift: recycled air, synthetic carpet cleaner, and somewhere underneath it all, the ghost of 1,000 lunches microwaved in the break room 2 floors up. He pulled his cart through the glass doors and let them hiss shut behind him. The wheels of the cart needed oil. They'd needed oil for 3 weeks. He'd put in the maintenance request twice. He'd stopped holding his breath about it. The janitorial staff worked in rotating sections, and Austin had landed the executive floor on Friday nights about 6 months ago. Before that, it had been Marcus, who'd transferred to the downtown branch. Before Marcus, it had been a woman named Delphine who'd retired and sent everyone on the floor a card with a sunflower on it. Austin hadn't known her, but he'd found the card in the break room trash and felt something about that. He didn't examine what. He parked his cart outside the cluster of corner offices and started with the conference room, the way he always did. Whiteboard wiped down. Chairs pushed in straight. The long mahogany table reflected his work light back at him in a smear of gold. Then, the open plan area. Bins emptied, keyboards dusted. The work was methodical and familiar, and he let his mind go quiet while his hands moved. This was the part of the night he didn't mind. The solitude of it. The way the building belonged to nobody during these hours, which meant it briefly, nominally, belonged to him. He saved the private offices for last. There were 4 of them arranged along the east wall, each with its own glass panel beside the door showing the name and title of whoever sat inside. Austin knew them all by the contents of their wastebaskets. The VP of Operations threw away an alarming number of granola bar wrappers. The Director of Finance printed emails and then threw the printouts away without ever seeming to act on them. The head of legal had a small potted cactus on her windowsill that was clearly dying and that Austin had been quietly watering for 2 months. And then there was the corner office, the big one. The one with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the expensive leather chair visible through the glass even when the blinds were half drawn. Michael Olsen, Chief Operating Officer. Austin had never met him. That was normal. Executives and janitorial staff occupied the same building in the way ships passed in open water, present in the same expanse but moving through entirely different currents. He knew Michael Olsen the way he knew all the executives, by the remnants they left behind. Michael Olsen's wastebasket contained printed spreadsheets covered in margin notes, empty water bottles, always the same brand, the occasional protein bar wrapper, and sometimes, rarely, but enough that Austin had noticed, crumpled drafts of what looked like handwritten letters that had been abandoned before reaching any conclusion. He'd never read them. That felt like a line even he wouldn't cross. The office itself was always orderly. Not in the performative way of someone who cleaned up before leaving, but genuinely, structurally orderly. Books on the shelf organized by what appeared to be subject matter. Pens capped and in their holder. The desk surface clear except for a desktop computer, a legal pad, and a framed photo turned slightly away from the door so Austin had never quite been able to see what was in it. The only exception was the coffee mug. Every single Friday night, without variation, Michael Olsen left a coffee mug on his desk. Not in the sink, not on the little credenza where the coffee maker sat. On his desk, positioned in the center, as though it had been placed there with intention. The mug was always empty. Sometimes there was a dried ring inside. The mug itself was plain white with a small chip on the handle that had been there since Austin's first week on this floor. He washed it every time, set it back on the credenza, beside the coffee maker, upside down on a folded paper towel, the way you were supposed to leave things that belonged to someone else. That was how it had been for 6 months, until the Friday in late September, when Austin West, on a quiet impulse that he could not entirely explain and that he spent the better part of the following week examining without resolution, made a fresh pot of coffee before he left. He didn't know why he did it exactly. He'd been tired that night. A long shift, a problem on the third floor involving a broken pipe that wasn't technically his responsibility, but that he'd ended up managing anyway because no one else was there. By the time he reached the executive floor, he was running 30 minutes behind, and his back ached, and the fluorescents on the east corridor were doing the flickering thing again that maintenance had also not fixed. He cleaned the corner office, emptied the bin, dusted the shelves, washed the mug with the chipped handle, and then he looked at the coffee maker on the credenza. A nice one, a real one, not the cheap drip machines in the break rooms, and he thought, it takes 4 minutes. He found the coffee in the little cabinet underneath, a bag of whole beans, a small grinder, a box of filters. Whoever stocked this had opinions. Austin ground the beans and listened to the machine run and thought about nothing in particular, and when it was done he poured a full mug and set it on the desk right in the center, right where the empty one always sat. He stood back and looked at it. It was a small thing, a ridiculous thing maybe. Michael Olsen would arrive Monday morning to a 3-day-old cup of coffee and probably assume a confused intern had left it there. Austin turned off his work light and pushed his cart back into the hallway. He didn't think about it again until the following Friday, when he arrived at the corner office and found the mug exactly where he'd left it, but clean, rinsed, set upright on the desk as if waiting. He stood in the doorway for a full 10 seconds. Then he went to find the coffee. October moved through the building the way seasons move through office spaces, in small surrenders. The days outside the floor-to-ceiling windows shifted from gold to gray. Someone on the executive floor brought in a decorative gourd arrangement that sat on the reception desk and slowly, optimistically, declined over the following weeks. Austin noticed all of it, the way he noticed everything on this floor, with the particular attention of someone who is present without being seen. The coffee became a ritual so quietly that he almost missed the moment it became one. Every Friday night, he made a pot. He poured a mug, he set it in the center of the desk. And every following Friday, the mug was clean and upright and waiting. That was all. No note, no indication. Just the mug, returned and ready, as though a silent agreement had been reached between two people who had never shared the same room at the same time. He started paying more attention to the office in a way he hadn't before, not nosily, not with any particular agenda, just with the sharpened focus of someone who'd been given a small mystery and couldn't stop turning it over. Michael Olsen worked late. Austin knew this not because he'd ever seen him, but because of the accumulation of evidence. The legal pad on the desk always had new notes by Friday, the handwriting slanting more heavily as the pages went on. The way it looked like the writing of a man getting tired. The water bottles multiplied through the week. The protein bar wrappers suggested meals eaten at the desk. The trash, in general, told the story of a person who didn't leave. He was tall. Austin figured that from the height the chair was adjusted to, organized but not compulsively, so there was a humanizing disorder to the legal pad. Notes the occasional coffee ring on the credenza from a mug set down without a coaster. The post-it note stuck to the monitor with a single word. Austin couldn't decipher from the angle he cleaned from. The framed photo stayed turned away. One night in early November, Austin was wiping down the credenza when his cloth caught the corner of a book that had been set face down on top of it, not on the shelf, just placed there. The way you put something down when you mean to come back to it. He straightened it without thinking. It was a worn paperback, a novel, the spine so cracked with rereading that the title was only partly legible. He set it back face down the way he'd found it. Then, because he couldn't help it, he went back and read the title, The Left Hand of Darkness. He finished his shift. He went home to his small apartment and his cat, an orange tabby named Biscuit who had the personality of a disgruntled middle manager. He ate cereal over the sink. He looked up the book. He ordered a used copy online that night, which he acknowledged to himself was slightly unhinged behavior. He read it over the following 2 weeks, in the half hours before sleep, and he understood why someone would reread it until the spine gave out. There was something in it about the loneliness of moving through a world that wasn't built for you, about connection across difference, about the particular courage of reaching towards something uncertain. He thought about the mug, clean and upright, every Friday. He thought about the crumpled letters in the wastebasket, abandoned at various stages of incompletion, the handwriting always the same, always trailing off before a conclusion. He was not, Austen reminded himself firmly, constructing a person out of debris. He was not falling for a figment. He was a 28-year-old man with a janitor's badge and a bad habit of living too much in his own head, and the COO of a mid-sized logistics company was not a story about him. He made the coffee the following Friday with slightly more care than usual and told himself it meant nothing. November became December with a corporate efficiency that transformed the executive floor into a landscape of tasteful, demographically neutral holiday decorations. A small artificial tree appeared in the reception area. A string of white lights went up along the east corridor, the same corridor where the fluorescent had been flickering for 2 months, and that maintenance had finally, inexplicably, fixed. Austen noticed the light was fixed before he noticed the tree. He was dusting the shelves in the corner office on the second Friday of December when something fell. Not dramatically, just a soft, papery tumble from the top shelf where a stack of folders had been sitting at a slight angle. One folder slid free, and the papers inside fanned out across the floor. He set down his cloth and knelt to gather them. They were meeting minutes, dry and official, and he stacked them back the way they'd been and was about to replace the folder when a single loose sheet slid out from the back. It wasn't a meeting minute. It was a handwritten note, not the crumpled draft letter type he'd seen in the trash, but a complete one, on heavy cream paper, folded once. His name was not on it, no name was on it. He should have folded it back and replaced it. He knew that. He read 2 lines before he caught himself. I don't know who leaves the coffee. I've started to think it matters that I don't know. He folded it immediately, placed it exactly where it had fallen from, put the folder back on the shelf. He stood in the center of the office with his cleaning cloth in his hand and his heart doing something loud and inconvenient in his chest. I've started to think it matters that I don't know. He finished cleaning. He made the coffee. He poured the mug and set it on the desk and stood back and looked at it for longer than usual. In the too quiet office, with the city lights blurring through the floor to ceiling windows and the little string of white lights from the corridor making a thin glow through the door panel. Then he left. Christmas came and went. The decorations disappeared from the executive floor on the first working day of January with the same corporate efficiency with which they'd appeared, leaving the space clean and slightly bleak and smelling of pine spray that would linger for another week. Austen had the week between Christmas and New Year off. He spent it doing very little of consequence, visiting his mother across town, going on a long walk with Biscuit in the carrier. Biscuit hated this and communicated his displeasure through pointed, sustained eye contact, finishing 2 more books. He did not think about the corner office. He thought about the corner office approximately 4 times a day. The Friday he came back, mid-January, there was a problem with the service elevator. A 30-minute delay while the building's maintenance crew determined that it was fine actually, and had just been making a noise, which was apparently allowed. Austen arrived on the executive floor 40 minutes behind schedule, already apologizing internally to no one, which was his own private way of managing the anxiety that came with things going wrong. He was moving faster than usual. Corners cut where they could be, not that he cut corners. More like corners briefly reconsidered and then honored anyway because he was constitutionally unable to do otherwise. He was emptying the last of the open-plan bins when he heard the elevator. The executive elevator, not the service one, a soft chime, the doors opening. Austen was behind the cluster of cubicle dividers and he did not move. He didn't hide. Hiding implied intent, and he had no intent. He simply went still, the way a person goes still when they're suddenly aware that the world has shifted slightly. Footsteps. Measured. Not hurried. A light came on in the corridor, the motion sensor overhead, and then a shadow crossed the glass panels of the east corridor, and then the lights in the corner office came on. Austin breathed very carefully. He heard the distinctive sound of a bag set down on a desk, a chair, the quiet strike of a keyboard waking up. He stood behind the cubicle dividers with an empty trash liner in his hands and processed the fact that Michael Olsen was for the first and only time in 6 months. In his office on a Friday night while Austin was still on the floor, he could leave. He should leave, probably. The open plan area was done. He could come back for the private offices another time, which was against protocol. But the protocol was his own internal protocol, and he was technically allowed to reorder it. He stood there for another full minute. Then, because he was who he was, he picked up his cart and walked it to the corridor. He did the 3 other private offices first. The VP of Operations, the Director of Finance, the head of legal, whose cactus had put out 2 new arms since October and was clearly thriving. He took his time. He was thorough. When there was nothing left to do but the corner office, he stopped outside the door. Through the glass panel he could see a broad back in a dark shirt bent slightly toward a monitor. Dark blonde hair, longer than you'd expect for a COO, curling a little at the nape of the neck. One hand on the desk, still, the other holding a pen that wasn't writing anything. Austin knocked on the open door. The man at the desk turned around. He was 33 or 34, Austin guessed, though the eyes were older than that. Gray, the color of winter water with a tiredness in them that wasn't acute but chronic. The tiredness of someone who had been running a long time. A strong face. A jaw that had a decision in it. A mouth that looked like it had forgotten recently what to do with itself. He looked at Austin. Austin looked at him. "Sorry to interrupt," Austin said. His voice was level. He was proud of that. "I'm running late tonight. I can come back." "No." The word came out too quickly, and something shifted in the man's expression. Awareness of how quickly it had come out. "No, it's fine. Come in." Austin came in. He did his job. He did it the way he always did it, methodical and quiet, starting with the bin and working outward. The man at the desk, Michael, though Austin couldn't quite make that name feel real yet, turned back to his monitor but didn't type anything. Austin could feel the attention in the room, the way you could feel a change in air pressure. He wiped down the credenza. He found the coffee supplies. He hesitated. "Is it all right if I make coffee?" He didn't know why he asked. He'd been making coffee in this office for 4 months without asking anyone. "It's part of... I usually make a pot. On Fridays." A pause from the desk. Longer than it needed to be. "I know," Michael Olsen said. Austin turned around. The gray eyes were on him, direct in a way that felt like a hand reaching across the room. There was something in the look that Austin couldn't parse immediately. Not what he expected from an executive caught working late, not performative, not dismissive. Something quieter than that, something that had been held for a while. "You've been doing it since September," Michael said. "The 23rd. Austin stared at him. "You know the date. I pay attention to things." A pause. "That particular thing, I paid extra attention to." The room was very still. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city continued its business, indifferent. "I'll make the coffee," Austin said. He turned back to the credenza and found the bag of beans and the grinder, and he did not look at his own hands to see if they were steady. They felt steady. He decided that counted. The grinder was loud in the quiet office. When it stopped, Michael spoke. "I looked at the security logs," he said. "I know that sounds... I wasn't trying to find out who you were. A brief silence. "I wanted to know." "And?" "Austin West, contracted through Service Pro, on this floor since March." Another pause. "You've been watering Jenna's cactus." Austin almost laughed. It was dying. "She thinks it's her green thumb finally coming through." "Don't tell her." "I wasn't going to." And there it was. The edge of something warmer in his voice, not quite a smile, but the architecture of one, the frame before the feeling fills it in. Austin set the coffee to brew and turned around and leaned back against the credenza with his arms folded, which was probably not the professional posture of someone on a contracted cleaning shift. But he was tired, and it had been a long night, and Michael Olsen was looking at him like he'd been waiting to for a while. "Why did you keep the mug on the desk?" Austin asked. "Every Friday." You had to walk past the credenza to leave. You could have put it there. The gray eyes held his. I don't know, Michael said. Habit maybe, or… I liked that there was a reason for it. A reason to leave the mug. A reason for someone to come back. The coffee maker finished with a small domestic sound. Austin poured a mug. The mug with the chipped handle. He walked it across the office and set it on the desk, and Michael Olsen looked at it and then looked up at Austin standing on the other side of the desk from him. And neither of them said anything for a moment. I read your book, Austin said, the one on the credenza, the left hand of darkness. Something happened in Michael's face. Real surprise, not performed, not managed. Just surprise, clean and open. You read it. I ordered a copy. I finished it in 2 weeks. He paused. The part about loneliness that doesn't know itself. I kept thinking about that. Michael was quiet for a beat. Then, carefully, I've read it 6 times. I could tell. The spine. The corner of Michael's mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Still the architecture. You notice a lot. It's the job. And then, because that wasn't quite true, and I pay attention. In here. I know that's maybe not. Don't apologize for it. The words were quiet but certain. Please. Austin met his eyes. Held them. Okay. The city hummed beyond the glass. The coffee steamed between them. And for the first time in 6 months, the corner office had 2 people in it on a Friday night. And neither of them seemed to be in any particular hurry. He left at midnight, still technically within his shift window, which he acknowledged was a thin justification for having spent the last 40 minutes in the corner office talking to a man he'd just met. Except, he hadn't just met him. That was the strange thing, the thing he turned over on the bus ride home and while feeding Biscuit and lying on his back staring at the ceiling. He hadn't just met Michael Olsen, he'd known him, or known a cough him, known the shape of him, the texture of the life he left behind in an office at the end of each week, for months. And Michael had known too, had known it was him making the coffee, had sat with that knowledge long enough that knowing the date felt natural. They talked about the book mostly, and then about the city. Michael had grown up here, Austin had moved here at 22 for reasons that had since dissolved, and both of them had stayed beyond whatever original purpose had brought or kept them. They talked about staying in a place, about what it meant to be rooted versus what it meant to simply not have moved. At no point did Michael look at his phone. At no point did he look at the work on his monitor. He sat turned in his chair to face the room, one elbow on the armrest, the coffee mug warming his other hand, and he listened to Austin in a way that felt deliberate. Chosen. The listening of someone who didn't do it casually. Austin got off the bus 3 stops early and walked the rest of the way in the cold January night and tried to put language to what had shifted and found he didn't have the words for it yet. He had 1 week until the next Friday. That week moved with the particular slowness of weeks that are being anticipated. Austin worked his other shifts, Monday through Thursday on the lower floors, different rhythms, different sounds, the daytime energy bleeding through even when he arrived in the evening. He did his job. He was good at his job. He talked to his coworkers, to Marcus via text, to his mother on the phone on Wednesday night, and none of it was the conversation he was replaying in his head. He wondered if Michael would be there again. He suspected not. One late Friday night was an anomaly, a circumstance of workload and timing, and the corner office would be empty the way it always was, and the ritual would continue unchanged, and that would be fine. That was fine. He almost convinced himself of this. He arrived on the executive floor at 11:15 to find the corner office dark, as expected. He did his rounds. He was thorough. He did not rush. When he reached the corner office and turned on his work light, he found the desk exactly as usual. Legal pad, water bottles in the bin, the week's accumulated evidence of a person working too hard. The framed photo still angled away. And in the center of the desk, where the mug always sat, a note. Folded once, on cream paper. The same heavy cream paper as the one that had fallen from the shelf in December. The one with 2 lines he'd read before he'd made himself stop. He stood for a long time looking at it. Then he picked it up. "I've been thinking about what you said. about staying in a place beyond its original purpose. I think I've been working in this building for 3 years and I still don't know what I'm staying for. That probably says something. I don't know what it says. Meigs Austin folded the note carefully, put it in his jacket pocket, made the coffee, set it on the desk. On the legal pad on the desk, the one that was always full of meeting notes and project timelines, he flipped to a blank page at the back. He wrote, "Maybe you don't have to know yet. Some things announce themselves when they're ready." Aches. He set the pen back where he found it, went back to his cart, finished his shift. He didn't sleep much that night. The following Friday there was another note on the desk, folded the same way, the same cream paper. That's a more generous interpretation than I usually give myself. I've been told I'm not good at not knowing. Professionally, this is considered a strength. Personally, I think it's just fear wearing better clothes. Austin pressed his lips together over something that wanted to be a smile. He wrote on the legal pad, "Fear wearing better clothes is still fear, but at least it's trying." AC. A pause. His hand hovered over the page. He added, "KCE, I like talking to you." 2 Fridays passed without Michael being there. The notes continued, the legal pad becoming their medium. Him flipping to the back pages, finding Michael's measured, slanting handwriting, responding underneath. It was absurd. It was something a person did in a different century, in a different story. It was the most connected Austin had felt to another person in longer than he wanted to examine. Michael wrote about his work, not the details, the feelings, the weight of decisions at scale. The way authority could become a kind of isolation, people performing ease around you because they needed something from you, so that after a while, you stopped being sure which interactions were real. Austin wrote back about visibility, or the lack of it, how a person in his role moved through space that belonged to other people, touching everything, known by almost no one. "We're both ghosts," Michael wrote one Friday, "just haunting different parts of the same building." Austin stared at that for a long moment. "Ghosts can see each other," he wrote back, "when they want to." The following Friday, Michael was there. February arrived with the blunt practicality of a season that knows it's transitional. The building's heating system, which had been running efficiently all winter, chose the second week of February to develop an opinion, cycling between too warm and too cold in a way that had people on every floor complaining. Austin arrived on a Friday in the middle of the month to find the executive floor warmer than usual, the heat having made its point. Michael was at his desk. He'd taken off his jacket. He was in a dark shirt sleeves pushed to the elbows, and he turned when Austin knocked on the open door with the particular attention he always turned now. Not startled, not performing welcome. Just turning because he'd been waiting for this. "You're on time tonight," Michael said. "Service elevator's been cooperating. Progress." He leaned back in his chair. There was a second coffee mug on the desk. Not the chipped one, a different one, from the credenza, a plain dark blue. He'd made the coffee himself. Austin looked at the 2 mugs. "I didn't know when you'd get here," Michael said. "I thought, if it was still warm." "It's warm." Austin came in. He sat as he'd started sitting on the Fridays Michael was there in the chair, angled toward the desk, a guest chair low-backed, that someone had moved closer to the desk at some point, and that neither of them had moved back. Michael pushed the blue mug toward him. They talked for 2 hours. Not about the book this time, or about staying in the city, about more immediate things. A project Michael had been building a case for that was being stalled by a board that didn't want to hear it. The particular frustration of being right and unable to make it land. About Austin's before. The degree he'd finished half of before money had made the choice for him. The vague and honest plan to go back someday, the way someday had the habit of being shapeless. "What did you study?" Michael asked. "Literature." "A beat." "I know. Why would you know?" "Because of the gap between that and what I do now is a whole comedy special." Michael tilted his head. "Is it? You read people's offices like other people read texts. You understood that book in 2 weeks in a way that I—" He stopped. "You think in precise, specific language, in the notes." He was looking at Austin directly, the gray eyes steady. I don't know why you think literature and what you do are in contradiction. Austin was quiet for a moment. Most people do. I'm not most people. I'm starting to understand that. The pause between them had a different quality than silences usually did, not empty, not awkward, full. The way a room feels when the windows are closed and the heat is on, and two people have been talking long enough that the air between them has become something shared. Can I ask you something? Michael said. You can ask me things. The note. In December, the one that fell. He was choosing words carefully. I left it there deliberately. Not where you'd see it unless something moved it. I wasn't sure if I wanted you to. Austin looked at him. And then I did. And then you did. A pause. Did it change anything? For you? He thought about that honestly. It made you more real, he said. You were very real to me already, but in a composed way, assembled from evidence. The note made you less composed. Something softened in Michael's face. Is that better? Yes. The city outside had gone into its late-night register. Fewer lights, the deep quiet that wasn't silence but was the city's closest equivalent to it. The coffee in Austin's mug had gone cool. He hadn't minded. I don't do this, Michael said, quiet but direct. I should say that. I am not someone who… A breath. I work. That is mostly what I do. I've been told this is a problem, and I've agreed with that assessment while continuing to do it, which tells you something. It tells me you're honest about your patterns, Austin said. That's more than most people. I'm not sure it's a virtue if you don't change the pattern. Maybe you're at the beginning of changing it. Michael looked at him for a long moment. Then, is that what this is? It wasn't quite a question. Austin heard it for what it was. I don't know what this is, he said honestly. I know I think about Friday all week. I know I stayed in this office for 2 hours drinking cold coffee, and I'm not in any particular hurry to leave. Michael said nothing. His hand on the desk moved slightly, just slightly, in Austin's direction. Not reaching, not quite, but the body suggesting what the mouth hadn't sorted out yet. Austin looked at the hand, looked up at the gray eyes. I should finish my rounds, he said. I actually haven't done the other offices yet. I did yours first. You always do it last. Tonight, I changed the order. Michael's mouth moved into something that finally, fully, resolved into a smile. It changed his whole face. Younger suddenly, the chronic tiredness stepping back from his eyes, something genuinely warm filling in the space. It was a good smile. Austin had suspected it would be. Go finish your rounds, Michael said. Austin stood. He was almost to the door when Michael spoke again. Austin, he turned. Next Friday. A pause. Not uncertain, just careful with it. I'll be here. Austin held that for a moment. Let it settle where it was warm. I know, he said. March came in with a confidence the season hadn't earned yet. Warm days undercut by cold nights. The city cycling between winter and the idea of spring, like someone who couldn't commit to leaving a room. The Fridays had found their shape. Austin arrived. Michael was there. Coffee was made, sometimes by Austin, sometimes by Michael, who'd started coming in mid-evening and making a pot that was cold by the time Austin arrived, and then making a second one. They'd laughed about that the first time it happened. The laughter had been easy. Austin stored the memory of it somewhere close. They talked with the ease of people who had spent months corresponding in the margins of a legal pad, who had mapped each other's minds before mapping each other's faces. The conversation moved without self-consciousness. Books and work and the strange shape of adult life. The way the things you thought you'd have figured out by now had the habit of remaining unlocked. On a Friday in the middle of March, Michael showed Austin the framed photo. It wasn't dramatic. Austin had finished clearing the desk and was reaching to wipe the surface when Michael said, "It's my dog." The photo. In case you were wondering. Austin straightened. I wasn't, he said. Then, I was. Michael turned the frame so it faced the room. A big dog, light-colored, caught mid-action in some outdoor light, blurry with motion. The photo was old enough to have a slightly different quality to it. Charlie, Michael said. He died 4 years ago. A pause. I've been meaning to take the photo home. I keep not. Because it still belongs there, Austin said. Michael looked at him. Yes. He said it like Austin had just translated something he'd been carrying in another language. They sat with that for a moment. Austin looked at the dog in the photo, the motion, the caught joy of it, and thought about the things people kept in their offices that had nothing to do with work, and everything to do with who they were when no one was looking. I have a cat, he offered. Biscuit. He has the energy of someone who was once a CEO and is deeply unhappy about the current arrangements. The smile again. God, the smile. You named your cat Biscuit. He was already named when I got him, from the shelter, but I was told I could rename him. He paused. I tried. He wouldn't answer to anything else. Michael laughed. A real one. Open, briefly careless with itself. The sound of someone who didn't do it enough and was surprised by it when they did. Austin felt it in his sternum like a tuning fork struck. I want to meet Biscuit, Michael said. Austin looked at him. That's a specific thing to say. I'm a specific person. You are. He was quiet for a moment. He'd probably ignore you for 20 minutes and then sit on your feet. That sounds like my entire professional life, but with better energy. They were smiling at each other across the desk with the city dark and open behind Michael's shoulder and the coffee cooling between them, and Austin was aware. With a clarity that wasn't startling because it had been building for months, that he was completely, specifically in trouble. Not the bad kind. The kind that comes when something is exactly what you were hoping for and you realize, belatedly, that you'd been hoping. He was replacing the liner in the conference room bin, an adjacent task he'd stopped leaving for later, when Michael appeared in the doorway. Not unusual by now. He wandered sometimes, during the long Friday nights, came to find Austin in whatever room he was working in, and leaned against the doorframe and talked, or didn't talk. Austin had stopped finding this strange, approximately one Friday into it. But tonight there was something different in the way he stood. A slightly different stillness, the kind that came before saying something you'd been deciding whether to say. Austin set down the liner and waited. I'm going to say something, Michael said. And I want you to know I've thought about this, because I think you know by now that I don't say things I haven't thought about. I know that. And I want to say it clearly. Not obliquely, not through a note on a legal pad, though I realize there's some irony in that because we have been communicating somewhat obliquely for, Michael. He stopped. Say it, Austin said, a breath. The gray eyes direct and steady, and underneath the steadiness, something that had been still for a long time and was deciding to move. I don't want this to only be Fridays, Michael said. The conference room was very quiet. I know what I am, Michael continued carefully. I'm the COO of a company and you work in this building, and I have thought about what that means, whether this is fair to you, whether there's something inherently. Stop, Austin said, gently. I'm not asking you to solve the geometry of it tonight. I'm just asking if you mean it. I mean it. Austin crossed the room. He stopped when there was a foot of space between them because he was cautious with good things, because he'd learned to be, and he looked up at Michael's face in the low light of the conference room, the tiredness in it that he'd come to think of as the watermark of a person who cared too much and didn't know how to say so. And he said, then, we figure out the geometry together. Michael's hand came up, slow, giving Austin every moment to decide. His fingers touched Austin's jaw, a light contact, tentative with something huge behind it. Okay, Michael said. His voice was not entirely steady. Okay, Austin said. They stood there like that for a moment, not kissing yet, just close, the decision made and settling into the room. Austin could feel Michael's breath warm and a little uneven, and the hand against his face was certain despite the uncertainty in the rest of him. And Austin thought, this is what it looks like when someone is brave about something private. He closed the distance. The kiss was careful, and then wasn't. Brief, and then longer. Michael's other hand finding Austin's waist. Austin's hands going to his chest. The conference room table cold at Austin's back, and neither of them noticing. The city beyond the glass didn't dim or brighten. The building hummed its usual hum. Everything was exactly as it had been and entirely different. When they broke apart, Michael pressed his forehead to Austin's. He was breathing like he'd been running. He started. For months I've been. I know, Austin said. Me too. April arrived. The coffee ritual did not stop, which Austin found interesting and then found necessary. Some things become themselves through repetition and then become something else, bigger, more weighted, while still looking like what they always were. He still made the coffee. Michael still waited. On the nights Michael wasn't there was still the mug, still the upturned waiting of it. But now there were other things layered underneath. Text messages through the week. Michael finding language for things outside the legal pad and outside the office. The medium shifting, but the essential quality of his communication. The same, specific, deliberate, honest, in a way that Austin had learned to look for rather than expect. A Saturday afternoon in March, when Michael met Biscuit, who ignored him for precisely 19 minutes and then sat on his feet with the authority of someone exercising a right. Michael had looked down at the cat and then up at Austin with an expression that Austin had had to look away from, briefly, because it was too direct with everything it was. They went slow. That was both of them, really. Austin by inclination, Michael by something older, the accumulated caution of a person who'd learned to contain what mattered. They saw each other outside the building on weekend afternoons walks and coffee shops and a Saturday morning at Austin's apartment that stretched into the afternoon without either of them deciding to let it. Just the hours unwinding naturally in the company of someone you didn't want to leave. The geometry worked itself out, gradually and unglamorously, the way most good things did. Michael was careful about the work context in a way that Austin respected. Not dismissive, not asking Austin to be invisible, but thoughtful about it, aware of the lines and honest when he was navigating them. Austin appreciated the thoughtfulness more than he'd have appreciated false simplicity. You could work somewhere else, Michael said one evening, not as a suggestion, as a thing he'd been sitting with. If it would be easier, I have contacts at 2. Are you trying to fire me? I'm trying to. I don't want you to feel. I don't want you to feel. I like my job, Austin said clearly, and I like this building. And I'm not interested in rearranging my life because someone in a corner office has feelings about it. A pause. Someone. You, Austin said, with the precision of someone who'd been learning to let himself be direct. I'm not interested in rearranging my life because you have feelings about it, even though your feelings are. He paused, noted, and appreciated. Michael looked at him the way he sometimes did, with that full, unhurried attention that still did something to Austin's chest even months in. My feelings, he said, are somewhat large at this point, in case that's not clear. Austin held his gaze. It's clear. On a Friday in late April, Austin arrived at the executive floor to find the corner office not just occupied but slightly different. The framed photo of Charlie was gone from the desk. In its place, on the credenza, was a new frame. He saw it when he came into the office, before Michael turned around. It was a photo of Biscuit, taken on that Saturday at Austin's apartment. Biscuit, on the windowsill, caught in afternoon light, looking at something outside the frame with the regal indifference he brought to all things. Austin stood in the doorway and looked at it. I had it printed, Michael said, without turning from his monitor. His voice was carefully casual. For the credenza, since the other one is at home now. Austin looked at the photo of his cat in a frame on the credenza of the COO's corner office, where it would be seen by everyone who came into this room for any reason, and felt something so big and uncomplicated move through him that he had to take a moment with it. You're going to have to explain that to people, he said. I'll say it's my cat. You don't have a cat. I might be getting one. He turned around then, and there was the smile, the one that had been coming more easily lately, less surprised by itself. Biscuit might need a companion. Biscuit would hate that. Biscuit would adapt. Austin crossed the room. He put both hands on the desk and looked at Michael directly. You put a photo of my cat in your office, he said. I put a photo of my favorite person's cat in my office, Michael corrected. The gray eyes were steady and warm, and everything in them was unhidden. There's a distinction. Austin leaned across the desk, kissed him once, brief and certain. When he pulled back, Michael was looking at him with an expression that had no professional quality to it at all, open and a little dazzled and completely, genuinely there. "I'll make the coffee," Austin said. "May." The city outside the windows had made its commitment, green and certain now, the evenings long enough that the light lasted past Austin's arrival, the building warm and exhaling the particular ease of a workplace in a good season. Austin had been on the executive floor for over a year. The Friday night routine had become what routines become when they've survived long enough to take root, not a ritual anymore, but a fact. The way some things that start as intention become, with time, simply who you are. He arrived at 11. He did his rounds. Efficient. Thorough. The cart's wheels still slightly squeaking because maintenance had a different opinion about urgency than he did, and this no longer bothered him the way it once had. He did the open plan area. The conference room. 3 private offices. He saved the corner office for last, the way he always had. Michael was there. Jacket off, sleeves pushed up, the desk in its usual midweek state of organized evidence. He looked up when Austin knocked, the turn immediate and specific, and Austin thought, there is no version of that gets ordinary. Late? Michael asked. Service elevator. Still? The building has opinions. He came in, sat in the chair that had migrated closer to the desk over the course of months and had never migrated back. How was your week? Long. A breath. The board approved the project. Austin sat up. The one you've been building the case for since November, yes. Michael's expression had a restrained quality that Austin recognized as the way he held good news he hadn't finished believing yet. They approved it today. Michael. Austin looked at him. That's significant. It's significant. A pause. I wanted to tell you first. I'm aware, that's a thing. It's a good thing, Austin said. Michael nodded slowly. Something was moving under his expression, working its way through. I've been thinking, he said, about the note, the first one, the one you found that fell. I think about it too. I don't know who leaves the coffee. I've started to think it matters that I don't know. He said it from memory, which meant he'd kept it. I've been trying to understand what I meant by that, at the time. Austin waited. I think I meant. He was precise even now, even with something this unguarded. I think I meant that the not knowing was safe. That knowing might make it something I had to decide about, and I was. A pause. I was very practiced at the time at not deciding. And now? He looked at Austin steadily. And now I have decided, thoroughly, without remainder. Austin smiled. He couldn't always stop himself. Without remainder. It's a mathematical term. It means. I know what it means. Michael looked at him. Then, I love you. Not preceded or followed by anything, just placed there cleanly in the space between them. The way he said things he'd thought about, with full intention and no apology. The office was quiet. The city moved beyond the windows, lit and indifferent, and inside the room, 2 people sat with something large and specific that had been building for almost a year. Austin looked at Michael Olsen, at the gray eyes and the cautious hands and the smile that still surprised itself and the photo of Biscuit on the credenza, and felt the thing that had been assembling itself inside him for months arrive, finally at its name. I love you too, he said, quiet and definite. I have for a while. I kept waiting for the right. He stopped, let out a breath. There's no right time. I know that. I just needed to be sure you knew what I was saying when I said it. What were you saying? That it's not the job. It's not the building. It's not even the Friday nights, though. He paused. The Friday nights are mine. Those are something I'm keeping. Michael's voice, when he responded, was lower. Every one of them. They sat across the desk from each other in the late-night quiet, and the night felt very full and very simple at the same time, and outside the city did what cities did, continued indifferent and enormous, completely unconcerned with the small specific necessary things happening in the lit windows of the buildings that made it. June, heat now, real heat, the city committing to summer the way it couldn't to spring, decisively and without qualification. Austin still worked the Friday night shift on the executive floor. This was a choice he'd made clearly and continued to make clearly. He liked the work. He liked the particular quality of a building at night, the ownership it briefly afforded, the way the space breathed differently when the day people were gone. He was good at it. He'd become, quietly, without announcement, very good at it, the kind of competence that didn't draw attention to itself, which was its own satisfaction. He'd also started taking one class, online, 2 evenings a week, the beginning of the path back to the degree that had been set aside. He'd mentioned it to Michael the week he registered, not making much of it, just mentioning it the way you mention things to people whose context you've become part of. Michael had listened and asked one question, "What are you taking?" And when Austin said contemporary literature survey, Michael had nodded and said, "Tell me what they have you reading." And that had been that. That was Michael. Ask the real question. Get the real answer. Move forward. On a Friday in the middle of June, Austin arrived at the executive floor at his usual time and let the glass doors hiss shut behind him and stood for a moment in the recycled air and thought, as he sometimes did now, about the person who had first pushed a cart through these doors over a year ago and wondered what that person would have made of where he'd ended up. Uncertain about most things, still hopeful about enough, he did his rounds. The conference room, the open plan, the 3 other offices, the VP still eating too many granola bars, the director of finance still printing and discarding. The cactus in the head of legal's office had put out 5 new arms and showed no signs of stopping, and Austin permitted himself a quiet satisfaction about that. He pushed his cart to the corner office. Through the glass panel, the light on, the familiar shape of a man at a desk who knew how to work too hard and was, slowly, learning not to. The chair turned at an angle, the monitor half attended. A mug on the desk, already poured. 2 mugs on the desk. Austin knocked. Michael turned. The look on his face was the same look it had been for months, and would be, Austin suspected, for a long time after, direct and specific, and containing something it had decided not to hold back anymore. "You're early," Michael said. Elevator cooperated. Miracles. Austin came in. He sat in the chair that had been his for months. Michael pushed one of the mugs toward him. "You made it before I got here," Austin said. "I've been here since 9. That's too long, I know." A pause. "I left by 7 last Tuesday." Austin looked at him over the mug. 7 p.m. "I'm working on it." "I know you are." He meant it. He watched it happening, the slow reprioritization of a person who had mistaken discipline for the whole of themselves. It wasn't fast. Good changes rarely were. But it was real. They talked. The project, which was moving forward in the way Michael had built the case for. Austin's class, the assigned novel this week, a heated discussion in the forum that Austin had declined to engage with, and then had engaged with at length and regretted somewhat. At one point, Michael said, "Come here." Austin looked at him. Then he stood and came around the desk, because when Michael asked for something directly, it was usually important to him, and Austin had learned to honor the important things. Michael took his hand. Just that, held Austin's hand, looking at it, his thumb moving across the knuckles. "I've been thinking," he said. About next year." He looked up. "I own an apartment I haven't used for anything except sleeping in for 3 years. You have an apartment with a cat who has claimed full territorial rights over approximately every surface." Austin waited. "I'm not suggesting anything drastic," Michael said, which was how he started suggestions that were not small. "I'm just noting that the apartment I live in is larger than necessary for one person, and that Biscuit, as you've mentioned, might benefit from more square footage." Austin looked at him for a long moment. Michael was steady under the look, a little careful, a little hopeful, the gray eyes with their winter watercolor and everything he'd decided not to keep contained anymore. "That's a long way to say something," Austin said. "I'm practicing being direct." "You're practicing." He squeezed the hand that held his. "You're also directly asking me to move in with you by bringing up my cat." Biscuit is a compelling argument. He is, actually. Austin was smiling now helplessly, the way he still got surprised by that this was allowed, that this was real, that the thing assembled from evidence over 6 months in a quiet office had become something you could hold in both hands. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. No, you're not, Austin said, but it's a good start. Michael laughed. The real one, the open one, the one that was less surprised by itself now, coming easier, practicing being easy. Austin watched it and felt the particular joy of witnessing someone become more themselves in real time. Outside, the summer city spread in every direction, lit and loud and enormous. Inside the corner office, the coffee cooled and the mug with the chipped handle sat on the credenza where it always did, upside down on its folded paper towel, waiting for next Friday. Some things become themselves through repetition. Some things become more. September. A year, exactly, from the night Austin West had made the first pot of coffee in a corner office for a man he'd never met. He'd requested the shift change himself. Moving to a different section, a new contract, better hours, a different part of the building. It was a promotion, of a kind, more responsibility, a small raise, the recognition of someone who'd been quietly excellent for longer than anyone had formally noticed. He came to the executive floor one last time. Michael was there. Of course he was, Austin had told him, and Michael had rearranged his Friday to be there, which Austin knew represented a genuine and meaningful logistical act. Austin did the floor one last time, the full round, all of it, thorough and unhurried. The conference room, the open plan, the 3 other offices. He left a small, anonymous note near the cactus in the head of legal's office that said it was the watering, because she deserved to know, eventually. He stood for a moment in each room and let them be what they'd been, spaces he'd known by night, by the residue and accumulation of lives lived in the daytime, by the particular loneliness and freedom of moving through a building that didn't know your name. He pushed his cart to the corner office for the last time. Michael was standing up when Austin came in, not at the desk, standing in the middle of the room, the city behind him through the windows, a mug in each hand. He handed one to Austin. I made it, he said. Austin took the mug, looked around the office, at the shelves, at the credenza, at Biscuit's photo in its frame, at the framed photo of Charlie that was home now, but had left a small rectangle of slightly unfaded paint on the desk surface where it had sat for 3 years. At the legal pad, at the pen in its holder, at the man in front of him. I'm going to miss this floor, Austin said. The floor. The floor. He met Michael's eyes, and the rest of it. The rest of it is coming home with you, Michael said, quietly. Certain. They'd signed the lease 2 weeks ago. Biscuit had inspected the new apartment with the careful attention of a structural engineer and declared it, through a prolonged sit on the kitchen counter, acceptable. Austin nodded, held the mug, let the room be what it had been and what it was. Then he said, Do you know why I made the coffee that first night? Michael considered. I've wondered. I was tired, Austin said. It had been a long shift. I was behind. And I looked at the coffee maker and I thought, it takes 4 minutes. And it seemed like, he paused, finding the words for something he hadn't quite put words to before. You'd had a hard week. I could tell, from the desk, from the note pile, from the number of water bottles, and I thought someone should do one small thing, for no reason, just because the person has had a hard week and deserves something warm. Michael was very still. You didn't know me, he said. No. A pause. But I knew the week you'd had. The gray eyes were doing the thing they did when Michael was moved and not trying to move away from it anymore. Holding it, letting it be visible, trusting the person in front of him with it. Austin, he said, I know. I'm going to love you for a very long time. Austin looked at him. At this specific, deliberate, slowly opening person who left notes on cream paper and kept a photo of a dead dog on his desk for 3 years because grief needed somewhere to live and reread a paperback until the spine gave out, and had sat in this office on 100 Friday nights with the city behind him, not knowing that someone was coming, faithfully every week, to leave something warm. I know, Austin said again. Me too. They stood in the corner office on the last Friday night. Austin West would work that floor, drinking coffee in the quiet that belonged to both of them, while the city did what it always did, continued enormous and indifferent, completely unconcerned with the small, specific, permanent things that had taken root in the lit windows above it. The mug with the chipped handle sat on the credenza, upside down on its folded paper towel. It had done its job. If you made it to the end, you're my kind of person. Leave a subscribe, comment down your favorite part of the story, and if you want early access to videos, exclusive content, or just want to support the channel, make sure to join our Patreon. Link is in the description. Even one member genuinely means the world to me. See you in the next one.